I quit a lot of my hobbies just to play with AI, to be honest. Right now, I spend probably 6 p.m. until 10 p.m. just tinkering with AI. But it's because I love it and I love being able to build and I love seeing the results. And sometimes, yes, there's a lot of regression. We'll see there's things on my product that are broken, but I have to deprioritize. And that's part of the process. And if you're okay with that being part of the process, you're going to enjoy it. But I do have to make time for it. I used to fly airplanes after work. I don't do that anymore. My instructor's been like, where are you? I'm like, well, there's some more important things that I'm working on right now.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of 10x Recruiting, brought to you by Metaview. I got my boy Sile in the building. Sile, what's up, man?
What's up? I never know how to answer that now because you made me so conscious about just actually saying how I am. I'm fine. Okay, everyone. How are you?
What's up is like, it's an American expression of like, yo, what's up, dude? Like, just what's up? That's it.
Yeah, not much. What's up with you? I think, anyway, whatever.
You. Today's episode is with Cassie Chao Leemans from Craft Ventures. This episode, guys, is so awesome. You need to get near a computer. It's so good because Cassie is the tip of the spear on building for herself in AI. Sile, what were your takeaways?
Basically exactly that, which is, I think Cassie is the type of, we take a lot of inspiration actually here at Metaview from people like Cassie, because AI has been such a powerful technology in general, but especially for people that want to experiment, that want to tinker, that want to build and like solve their own problems. And obviously we think of Metaview's mission more as, well, how do we get all of those amazing powers and how do we push them against like scaling organizations so that everyone in the company can benefit from sort of some of the stuff that she's thinking through for herself. So yeah, I think it's just a great example of almost what's possible and how do we spread that across the organization. I think one is Metaview's, like we spend a lot of time thinking about that Metaview, but second, I'd say a lot of listeners of this podcast who are, let's say you're a talent leader at a scaling company and you see this and you're like, well, why aren't my team doing that? Like there's real work, like to get the transformation done, to get organizations to work in the way that Cassie is as an individual / as a small team within Craft is the work for the next, I would say, anywhere between 6 to 24 months. So yeah, it was really, really cool just for that inspiration.
So I think there's so many takeaways. And what I love about this episode is we went like high level of here's the problems I'm solving, all the way down to how the hell did you just build that thing? The one takeaway from this podcast is that one-shotting a product with AI is not real. Cassie mentions it a bunch of times because her outputs look amazing, but she did not get those outputs from one input, from one prompt. She does say her husband is pretty good at that, but like I don't believe it for the complexity that she is building and the utility that she is driving. And I think this is the thing that I've been learning with AI as I've gotten more into Claude over the course of the last few weeks. It's an iterative approach.
Yeah, for sure.
And shit's gonna break on the edges. And you just gotta be okay with the shit being broken on the edges because you're not Metaview. You don't have 40 engineers that are working on this problem. And so if you are vibe coding and you are trying to bring your utility to yourself, you got to focus on the core problem you're solving and you got to be okay with shit breaking and you got to be okay taking turns on the thing as you find out new edge cases. I don't think people really get this. And when they get into a tool like Claude, they get frustrated when they don't get the output that they expect after the first prompt. And Cassie does an amazing job of explaining it, of getting into why that's the case, how she has overcome those problems. And then she shows us everything she's building, which is so dope.
It's also a great demonstration of the importance, frankly, of the human in the loop, right? I guess one of the doomer sort of perspective is, oh, AI is going to do all this stuff. Well, no, because frankly speaking, right now, Cassie is much better at building these applications than someone that has no recruiting knowledge or experience or taste. And so it's actually good if you have a more iterative, collaborative experience with AI, that's good. You should see that as a good thing from almost like the durability of your career, because the reason you're able to judge the quality of the output and able to articulate the thing it needs to do next is because you have expertise that's really valuable and taste and judgment and all these things. So I think flipping that, and people need to understand LLMs are here to stay. They are magic. They are amazing. If you can't get it to do good stuff, it's on you. But that's a good thing because it means you are still a really core part of how we, improve our processes, improve how we recruit, improve the world, however you want to think about it.
Yep, totally agree with you. Well, without further ado, you guys are going to love this conversation. Here's Cassie. This is 10x Recruiting, a podcast from Metaview. Let's get after it. All right, Cassie. So you are one of the few people who I think is building cool shit with AI that has real recruiting utility. But you're not a technical person, right? You grew up in recruiting. Where did you start and how did you start figuring this out?
I feel really silly because I spent 15 years of my career interviewing engineers. Engineers don't come at me. Most of the time, I had no idea what you're talking about. And we'd be Googling while on the phone calls with you. But now it's funny because all of these AI tools have given us so much access to be able to build things that maybe we had the idea in our mind, but the barrier was, I need an engineer to help me build that. And that barrier has now disappeared, which is wild to me. And I laugh because Replit, one of our portfolio companies, when they first started out, they had the 100 days of code. I'm like, I'm going to do this. And the number of times I was on day one of 100 over and over again, like, this is just impossible. There's no way. I'm not going to get through this. There's so many ideas that I have, but this is so hard. And I'm not technical by any means. And it wasn't until a few years ago, my husband actually went to a Replit hackathon. And he was starting to piece things together on his own at that time and started building out product. And I've followed his journey, and he's in recruiting as well. I followed his journey and I just kind of watched from the outside of his office. I'm like staring at his screen. And it wasn't until maybe a handful of months ago. I know he was working on Cursor, but he uses Claude Code as well on his terminal. Like, what's that? I kept asking him, can you put that on my computer? Like, what is it? What are you doing? And he said, Cassie, I'm also not technical. I could try and explain it to you, but it's not going to make very much sense. So what I'd suggest is that you just go to Claude and ask it. And I've always been a very big ChatGPT user. Almost all my projects are in ChatGPT. I'd barely ever gone onto Claude.ai. So I just went onto Claude. I remember this was beginning of February this year. I went to Claude.ai, typed in, my husband is using this terminal thing called Claude Code. How do I get this on my computer? What steps do I take? Immediately it says, this is a great time for you to get started, and lists out every single step that I can take to get this onto my computer. So you have to download a couple packages. I'm like, what does that mean? And that's the barrier that a lot of people, I feel like they don't know how to take that first step. And then they say, well, what do I do next? So I would go to my husband and he'd scream out, just ask AI.
Yep.
And it's true. You just follow up with AI. I don't see what you're telling me to do, right? When I started my GitHub, we can talk about why I even use it. But when I started GitHub, it would tell me the instructions. I'm like, I don't see what you're seeing. And I just screenshot it, throw it into Claude. What button am I supposed to be pressing? Or like, where am I going to find this information? And that's kind of how you continue to learn and grow and understand what kind of tools you want to utilize. And it's not as scary anymore when you know Claude will literally answer every single question for you.
Okay. So that we're going to show some of your stuff too. And so for people that are listening, you should definitely try and get to a computer to watch this because what Cassie's built is awesome. But the second thing I typically hear from people, there's typically this like, oh, I don't know what to do sort of a thing, which is go ask AI is your answer to that. And that is the best answer. The second thing I hear from people is I don't have time. I mean, you're busy. You work at a VC firm. How did you find time, or how did you think about the time allocation required for you to start like using it and becoming really good at using it?
I quit a lot of my hobbies just to play with AI, to be honest. Right now, I spend probably 6 p.m. until 10 p.m. just tinkering with AI, but it's because I love it and I love being able to build and I love seeing the results. And sometimes, yes, there's a lot of regression. We'll see there's things on my product that are broken, but I have to deprioritize. And that's part of the process. And if you're okay with that being part of the process, you're going to enjoy it. But I do have to make time for it. I used to fly airplanes after work. I don't do that anymore. My instructor's been like, where are you? I'm like, well, there's some more important things that I'm working on right now. And this part has been, I consider it a hobby of mine. This is something I'm building for. It does help me with my day-to-day work, but you do have to make time. Once you get past that initial learning curve of like, what is this? How do I ask it questions and whatnot? you're able to build products faster and faster. So I built a Chrome extension in about 2 hours one evening. That did help me with assessing a profile based off of a job description of a role that I've never worked on before, right? Building out competencies for that right within my Chrome extension, and OpenAI pulls all of those details out into a competency matrix, then evaluates the person's profile based off of that. 2 hours, right? I spent a weekend building out a talent map for an industry I've never worked on before, manufacturing processes and manufacturing plants. Not, or technology investors on the software side, like not something that I had done before. So first, deep diving with AI, understanding the research there, but then how do I build this out to showcase the work that we've done on the research side? That one took about 2 days, but it's because every time I'd step away, I'd be like, oh, it'd be great if I had built this dashboard out for them, right? And then you
Exactly.
can go back and iterate and then templatize. So in the future, I've had an investor be like, can we do this for another company? Absolutely. I've already templatized it. I just need to do deep research on that next company, and then we can port that into the template. So things will get faster. And one thing that I've noticed too, and I know Claude Design has come out, haven't had time to work on that, but with every net new model that comes out, time is compressing. That's what I tell everybody. Things are going to get faster. The first part is just asking those questions, getting curious, and understanding how you can partner with the AI to make it work. But yes, it might start off with several hours every single night for a couple of weeks, and then over time it gets faster and faster.
So the next thing is, what do I build? What do I do? And the what I do here is I just have a real problem, and I'd like stew on it for a minute, and I'm like, okay, how would I like actually solve this if I had an engineer to like help me solve it? That's kind of how I think about it. So I would love for you to share your screen and tell the story first about like the problem you were facing, and then how you went about thinking about the solution, and then the solution that you landed on.
So this is my tool called Radial, named after a terminology in flying. But ultimately, it is pulling everything together that I felt was important in my day-to-day job as a recruiter. These are not all working at this moment, but I don't care about my dashboard very much right now. So it's not something that I'm prioritizing. I know that we talked at HR Transform about the product that changed my life, but it is my prep, my call schedule. There it is. So this is the one that I use almost every single day. And so I told you that something that I found very challenging for a VC talent partner is that we talk to all walks of life every single day, whether it's a candidate, whether it's a peer in the VC world, whether it's an investor, founder, vendor, comp consultant, whatever it may be. And we need context of these conversations that are happening every single day. What I used to do, I went into my Google Calendar. I'd click open the LinkedIn profile that I forced that person to put in. I'd go type in their email address into my email for context. Have I talked to this person before? Let me go check my database. And you have all of these fragment components of where context is on the person you're about to talk to. First thing I did with Claude, connect to every single tool that I utilize, mainly Google. So it was Gmail, Google Calendar, and then my note taking. So we've got Metaview, we've got Granola, and we've got it all on our end. And then also my database, which was Thrive. And we can talk a little bit later. I actually built my own CRM as well, because it does actually make things a little bit faster by doing that. But the first thing I built was the scheduling part of my tool, because I'm like, it would save me an hour every single day if I'm not just clicking open these things, searching for the person. And a lot of my calls are back to back. So I feel really bad when, yes, I have my note takers taking all these notes, but I'm still looking around being like, why am I talking to this person? And what is the context that I have here? Right. So this morning spoke with our new VP people in one of our portfolio companies. Why am I talking to this person? I'm connected with her. She does have, see, here's things that you learn is this is her work email address, which is brand new to my database. But now I have to think about, I actually have context with this person because I've used her personal email account before. So you have to work through these types of edge cases when you are building product. So another thing, I've deprioritized it right now. I've got enough context knowing who I'm talking to here. But those are things like you're going to learn when you are coding or building, is there's going to be a lot of different edge cases that you have to think through and think logically through with the AI. So this is the first thing. After these conversations, I actually have something automated every day at the end of day. I think it's 6 p.m., where it processes all of my calls. So the first part is it's pulling all this information in. And every time it sees a new email address, it's actually checking my database, which I've built on Supabase. And if the person is not in there, they're injecting that person in there and then enriching with another tool that we use, Harmonic, which is one of our portfolio companies. It's got work history data on this person. So we could talk through all the data schema on my Supabase. But then if they're not new, it's pulling the context from my database. How do you know this person? When's the last time you talked to them? And all that context there. But at the end of the day, with all of the notes that we take in our AI note taker, it is now upserting that information into my database as well. So enriching more and more context on the same person or new people that we're talking to so that I can be the first to say, hey, actually, I have 3 search partners that are perfect for your head of finance search. Here's the context. These are the roles they've worked on before. Here are other VC talent partners that have said great things about them. We have high signal, and I don't have to look through a Google Sheet, an Airtable, a Google document, and random places via email to get that type of context. Same with my candidates, same with just any other person that I'm talking to. So my database is heavily focused on people, and then we build based off of those people. So companies, the network, et cetera.
So this feels like incredible utility for anybody that has a lot of external calls. So obviously we're in recruiting for sure, execs for sure, salespeople, like for sure. You had mentioned a couple times about there's like things broken in here. And I mean, just the scale of this thing already kind of like makes my mind melt a little bit. So talk about the iterative approach in your building and like, where did you start? How did you start testing? Like, how do you, and are you still building? Like, what does that look like?
That's a great question because I don't want people thinking, I just asked AI to build me something and this is what showed up.
You
Because
didn't, you didn't one shot it.
it is absolutely false. That's kind of how my husband tries to cook things up. He'll be like, I want to one shot this product, and his product spec is like 10 pages long. Mine is, I will stream of consciousness. I use this app called Whisperflow. I talk to my computer. This is my problem. Every day I look at my Google Calendar. I'm clicking through every single person that I'm talking to. I click the link open to make sure that I can see their LinkedIn profile when I'm talking to them, but then I'm also going to my email, checking their email address, reading the context of every thread that I've been on with this person. Then I go to my database. Have I talked to this person before? So that's how I started. And that's what I told Claude. Like, this is the background. I would like to build something that aggregates all of this information. And I've already given you connection to my Google Calendar, to my Gmail, to my CRM. Is there a way we can pull all of this information together? And so how I originally started, the output was in my terminal. And I already thought, this is awesome. Every day I'm just going to say, prep my calls. And inside of the terminal, which if you haven't seen before, it looks like the Matrix on your computer. And it's like that font in the Matrix. But you learn to read it, and it writes in plain English for you, but the output is just plain text there in your colored terminal. I thought that was all I needed. I'm like, this is awesome. Of course, I still had to copy the LinkedIn URL that it was outputting, paste it into my browser. I'm like, that doesn't work that well, actually. So that's when I started thinking of the concept of an app, being able to build that together. And then having LinkedIn URLs right now, like it didn't pull LinkedIn URLs. Why? It didn't have that context. I didn't make Michelle put that information in for herself. I don't have that context for today, but let's actually see, you're right here. I've got context there of why we're talking as well. But let me see. I've got maybe some other days. Hopefully it loads here. So I did have a candidate, a people leader. She was introduced to me by somebody else. And then it says where she's based and then LinkedIn. And so it'll actually pull her LinkedIn URL for me. Oh, it's not sharing the tab, but it opened her LinkedIn URL for me. Then you're going to start to see, I don't know if this is considered regression, not going to try and make up a word here, but it's not always going to be the same thing every single time. So then you learn, I have to make sure the logic is crisp, my template is crisp to my AI, explain to it the output should always look like calendar title, location of the person, who I'm talking to, right? And I've actually started noticing if a coordinator scheduled the call, it thinks I'm talking to the coordinator versus the founder. So that's another piece of logic that I have to think through, deprioritized. It's not something I care too deeply about right now, but I know down the line that is going to affect what the database looks like. So
Got
that's something I'm going to have to think about.
So when you make those changes, how big of a lift is it when you already have code and you're non-technical?
There's a few things behind that. The lift is not heavy. You're just like, this is broken. I like this output, and I'll screenshot it. I like this output with Mary and my location and her LinkedIn. Beautiful. Paste that in. I don't like what you just did today. This is strange. What happened here? And it's actually very helpful to ask Claude, what happened? Like, what's different? Why didn't you read the full template like you did before? How do we make sure that we don't do this again? Clearly, it doesn't guarantee that it's not. I'm sure there are ways to make it crystal clear every single time. I'm not there yet. And it's just something that I don't care enough about yet to make it so fine-tuned. But if there is something that I'm going to work on, it's going to be that fine-tuning with my database down the line.
How do you make the decision on Claude Code versus Claude Cowork?
I get that question every single time. I've never used Claude Cowork ever. Yeah, I've never tried it. I went straight to, because my husband was using the terminal, I just went straight to that. And once I figured it out, I'm like, well, I don't need anything else because this works. And it seems to be very powerful and it can connect to anything. And then I quickly did an assessment. I asked Claude, like, what's the difference? Is this one more powerful? Should I be using Cowork? And it's like, yeah, if you know how to use Claude Code, just stick with it. And that's why. It's just
Yeah,
as simple as that. I don't know the difference, really.
Yeah, I actually think it's probably a blessing in disguise because I'm currently in Cowork and not yet on Code. And it feels like Code is actually the more powerful feature or product rather. And I'm finding limitations in Cowork that Code would solve. And so if you're listening to this, my strong guidance to you is someone who has been following Cassie and seeing her get utility and then kind of like, you've been trailblazing and I've been riding in your wake. I should have just went to Code and started there.
I think that was just by happenstance for me, and it was a lucky happenstance.
Anything else that you've been cooking on over there that we can take a look at?
So the one that I want to, and I think I have to stop sharing and keep sharing new tabs. So this is my network. It is a mess. But the whole purpose of this was I used a CRM, very, very old school CRM. I'm not going to speak ill of them because they've done the work that we've needed them to do. However, traditional CRMs are extremely manual. When you talk to a person, you've got to ingest them. We always use a Chrome extension to LinkedIn, ingest their information. You talk to them, you have to click activity. I did a phone call, notes, copy and paste your notes from wherever. You're just straight typing them in. Emails, manual, tagging, manual. And I'd be the first to say, if I'm doing 8 back-to-back calls, I'm not manually tagging those people. And I'm not going to remember what tags out of my 200, 300 drop down list of tags, which one I'm going to put them on. So I'm the first to admit, literally the worst talent partner when it comes to tagging people manually. If I don't, though, what ends up being really difficult is recalling these folks. So I was recently asked for head of finance, which was an industry that I worked on for 2.5 years here at Craft, building out the finance leadership network. Who do you know, Cassie? Finance leader, would be great at this stage, has done this from 0 to 1, built it from scratch, and all this other context. Be like, well, shit, I'm going to have to go in and just filter finance and then open every single profile and see what happens. And not only that, I have to read the notes to make sure that the context is there. And that's one thing tags don't get, is the nuance from what you've actually talked about with that person. If someone has run a team of 40, we used to have to do tags of tag team 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 40. And I'm like, okay, well, if I was also searching filters of people who have done over 100, they should have also known how to manage a team of 40. So it's like, what tags do you put in there to start surfacing the right people? And that has always been a pain point for me that I learned coming into this role. Being an internal recruiter before, very rare, and I didn't work on executive before, but very rare to go back into my candidate database to be sourcing these folks based off of this type of data. So I learned that fast and hard here. That information is critical. And the first thing I did, Claude, you have API access to my CRM. Here is a job description. Let's just see if you work. Here's P sales. Here's the job description. Let's also deep research before you do anything. Go online. Better understand, is it, what stage is this company? How much funding do they have? Who are they selling to if we don't have that context already? Who do you want, right? So start building out that persona, because not every job description says that either, right? They're just like, we want someone who has done this ACV and sold enterprise. But then like get deeper into the context if we don't have that already. And then go look inside of my database. And I think my CRM knew I started doing it because it made 800 API calls to my database to find me a list of 10 people. But I didn't work on sales initially. That was a former team member of mine. These were all her candidates. She had all the notes in there, thank goodness, and very detailed notes, which has been helpful. And it started surfacing me a list of 10 people with every detail of why we should even be looking at them. Worked at this company, which sells exactly to the same user that you're looking for. Also had a team of X, all pulled from the context there. That was the first post I ever posted on LinkedIn was, holy shit, I just solved my problem. And this is something that I've been wanting to build for 4.5 years and haven't been able to. And it looks janky. The output's in terminal, right? If I copy and paste it, the formatting's all wrong in email. However, this is step one. And from there, I'm like, how do we make this faster? And so I'm not using tokens, pulling from some other company's API and just back and forth pinging. And it took like 10 minutes for it to do, which in the grand scheme of things, very short compared to what I used to do of opening every single profile. I'm like, how do I make this even faster? And that's what I'm in the process of building out right now. So that's why I built my own CRM. I pulled a lot of my data into Supabase, which is the database I built. You do have to think through what that data schema looks like. It is messy. You are only as good as your database is clean. And that's one thing that I have to work through a ton right now. That is the number one priority that I have at this point in time. But that's ultimately what this focus area is on the top, I'm going to have an area that I can dump in a job description, or I can just dump in a bunch of things like VP, early stage sales engineers. Those are things that I want to be able to pull off of and then get the right context there. Not fully working. I had multiple different iterations on what the search functionality was. Somehow it still works in Claude Code. So today I actually just asked Claude Code, I need a head of finance. These are my notes from my intake meeting with the founder. Pull up, folks, every single person that matched these criteria. And we sent over a list of 7 people to him. And I remember all of these finance leaders. It's just more, are they ready to move? The founder actually already responded back. I love these top 3. It does look like they've just moved, but can we still try and reach out to them? The rest of them also look great if you want to reach out to them as well. So that's exactly what I want to do, is be able to turn that around really quickly versus me being like, let me get back to you by end of week, because I have to look through every single profile of our thousands and thousands of people we have.
Okay, you've mentioned Supabase twice. Why did you choose that as your database? And what did you do with all your historical data? Like, did you import it in? Did you just say, I'm going to go forward and cut new, and then think about, like, how did you think about that?
So Supabase is one of our portfolio companies, shameless plug. So I knew what they did. I didn't know how to start. Obviously, I'm like, I don't know how to build a data schema, but ask AI. I'm like, AI, you can see all of my API endpoints inside of my CRM. And I can't believe I'm even using these keywords, because I didn't even know what that meant 2 months ago. But I said, what can you see in my CRM that I'm paying for right now? It gave me a whole list of objects. Okay, candidate, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, based off of this, I don't want to lose any information from my CRM. How can we build out a data schema together that is revolved around people and then everything around that. And I understood the concept of a relational database, but I didn't know how to build one. Like, how do you join tables together? What's important here? How do I make sure that things can move very quickly? The last thing you want is, it's kind of the example that I tell people is, you don't want a Google sheet that is 100,000 cells large. It takes forever to be able to go through that as a database. So then that's why relational databases come into use, right? And why Airtable became so popular is because you have multiple tables and they're all connected to each other based off of what you're searching for. And that's how you can go and query. So I'm like learning these things as I go along. I asked Claude, I would like to build this database. Here are tools at my disposal. How much is this going to cost me? And it said, the amount of data you have, you are on the free tier of Supabase. And I'm like, that sounds great. I like free. Let's try it. How do I sign up? And this is where I'm like, what button do I click? And Claude is like, show me what you see, because this button should be here. I'm like, well, I don't see it. So would screenshot it and then have Claude walk me through the process of actually setting it up. It'll tell me, you need to run this SQL query in your SQL editor. I'm like, what does that mean? They're like, just copy this, paste in the SQL editor. There should be an output. Tell me what the output is. And I'll be like, it says no rows returned. It said, that's exactly what I want to see. It's working now. And that's how we build it out together.
So there's two big takeaways that I have from this so far. One is that context is king. And Sal and I have talked about this a lot, but your secret to giving Claude more context is using whisper flow to dictate to it. So instead of like typing on like the analog for people is when you're working with a colleague and you're trying to solve a problem, is it faster to pick up the phone and call them, or is it faster to type out every message in Slack? And the obvious answer is pick up the phone and call them, which is what you're doing with whisper flow. Is that a fair analog?
I think that's a great way of saying it. And the thing with texting too, I've got long fingernails. I'm like texting friends and whatnot. I've always been a voice to texter. Without whisper flow, I didn't Siri has no idea what I'm talking about. I guess it doesn't understand when I'm like slurring my words. But whisper flow has been able to pick up that context nuance, what I'm talking about, and it will update. Like if I spelled your name differently and changed it and edited it, it understands that too. So I've absolutely loved the tool. But I think there's something to be said about the stream of consciousness too, where you want to just verbally vomit all of your ideas into one. And you can even say, I'm not sure if this is thinking about it the right way. Am I missing anything? I would just talk to Claude in that way, and it'll give me its feedback back to me in a very colloquial way. And that's what I really appreciate about it. When I think slowly, though, I do type word for word out because I can't think fast enough to explain what I'm trying to say. Then I will type it out.
The second thing is that, you know, this term called one-shotting, which we referred to earlier, essentially means you do one prompt and it's the perfect output. It's gotten you past the goal line, you scored a touchdown, you got the thing that you wanted with just one prompt. And what I'm hearing you say is I'm actually going back and forth over and over again. Is that true? Is that what you're doing? Is that how you're working with it?
I feel like my husband and I are opposite builders. He wants to think holistically, which I think there is a time and a place for that. I just don't feel like I'm that type of builder. And it could be really, really inefficient. I'm very honest with people. I'm learning as I go with this. I don't come from a product mindset background, but I have to be now, right? And you constantly have to think about what is that output that you want. But every time you build something, let's say this network page, then you see, I don't like this actually. What do I want to do differently? And then iterate based off of that. And it's very hard to do that if you don't see it already. And that's what ended up happening was the reason why I ended up building an app. Like I mentioned, Terminal is good enough. It will output the response that you want. But I started seeing, do I have duplicate candidates inside of my database right now? And I'd ask it, and it's like, yes, it looks like this person and this person have similar backgrounds, but they have different email addresses. I'm like, oh, shoot, I didn't think about this, right? And so you learn through this process iteration. I'm like, wow, how am I going to get it to show me what my database looks like so that I can go in and edit this. And that's why I built the app too, is so I could visualize everything that was actually happening on the back end. Did I initially think that I needed to do this? Claude actually said, I can be your user interface. You don't need to build a web design if you don't want to, especially if you're a team of one, right? Single player, you just need context on your database. You don't need to build that if you don't want to. But I started learning I kind of need to because I need to see what's going on that's wrong inside. So most of what you see visually is me trying to get a better understanding of what I've actually even built and where is it getting messy? Where do I need to prioritize my time? And then of course I've built like additional features on top of that that could help save me time.
Yeah, the process of iteration you're describing sounds easy. The concern I have when I hear it is, oh shit, am I going to have to like go and rebuild this thing? Is all the time that I'm investing here, is it just like this learning expedition versus like true utility, which is what I need in my day to day now? So have you had to do that? Have you had to like go and start over? Or is it just all like process of iteration?
To be honest, I feel like I maybe should start over my database side. Of course, I haven't even taken the time to look through every object of my data schema. Maybe I should start there before saying, erase it all, let's start over. But I have not had to rebuild anything yet. And again, the fallback, you can always think of the fallback is just going straight to terminal, going back and saying, make those 800 API calls to my former CRM and get me the context that I need. It's a lot more timely, it's a lot more costly, but I have a fallback there instead of having a pretty interface with something that I've built, right? And if I do need to rebuild, I could probably spin off my GitHub repo to something else like, hey, let's try this again. I haven't had to, but again, I think people forget just because you've built this doesn't mean the original doesn't work anymore, which was just that output in terminal.
That's a good point. For the iterative changes in Claude Code, do you find that those changes often cause second order breaks in other places?
Yes. Fortunately, each of my product features operate a little bit differently and are separate of each other, and they pull from different parts of my CRM. I think if I make changes to the network part, so this is, again, the most important part about my database is the people that are in it. And so I did make a change recently, and I don't think it fully implemented, where it does make an assumption if I'm talking to a candidate versus someone who is a vendor versus someone who is a founder. And that can change too, right? We could have a founder that doesn't want to be a founder anymore, wants to go become a C-suite candidate at a different company. How do you change all of that inside of your system? So I built a tool that says, hey, let me go in and edit the person type. And it pops up. It's a little bubble. I click on it, click save. On one screen, it says that it changed, but on another screen, it doesn't when I actually click into their profile. So something is broken there. I'm like, ugh, this is such a mess, but I don't need this right now. I just need it to be able to read context on every single person. That is the most important part of why I'm building it, right? So there's all these like nice to haves, and you really have to learn how to prioritize what do you want your end goal to look like.
I would really underscore that for people. Like as someone who's earlier on the journey than you, that has been like, I want it to be buttoned up. I want, I's dotted, T's crossed. And that is just not what this is. Like you need to get utility and focus on utility and be okay with weeds growing in the yard. Like it's just part of the deal. It's going to happen. Like you're not going to ever fully get rid of them.
Yep.
And so that is that when you are vibe coding, that is the expected outcome.
That is the quintessential thing you have to remember. And I am a perfectionist. I'm type A. I want things to be orderly. And I've learned now being like, that doesn't matter. What matters is actually me focusing on this right now. Otherwise, I'll never get this done, right? And think about the massive engineering teams that build out all the products that you use day to day now. You don't have time for that. That's not something you should be prioritizing. Focus on, again, that first principle of what are you trying to solve for? And does it solve it right now? And everything else is supplemental.
Yeah, there's a line from Yellowstone, the show Yellowstone, which I love, to where Rip, they have this like big problem of how they're going to get the cows in some place and they can't figure it out. And at the end he goes, what we just decided on is fuck it, go. Like just fuck it and go.
Yep.
Um, Off of the topic of AI, which I could talk to you about for probably 24 hours. You wrote a banger article called Trust the System You Built. I actually completely disagree with your conclusion, but can you tell the audience what the article is about and why you wrote it?
Yes. I think it was called References, Backchannels, and Outsourcing Your Judgment. And reason being is because we have had a couple of portfolio company talent leaders come to me and say, we've built out this recruiting process. Interviewers are trained on it. They interview. And then all of a sudden, the founder, one of the leaders, just goes to the Slack channel and says, anybody know this person? What do you have to say about them? You're just like, so then you just spent 5, 10, however many hours of your team's time interviewing, and they all said yes on this person. And you're just waiting for someone at the wedding to say, I object, right? What does that signal to the people who have invested their time building institutional knowledge with you and building based off of the values your company is hiring off of for this outside person or someone else to say, actually, I don't think you should hire this person because I had a bad time with them, right? And that is so dangerous because it's like, why even build your recruiting function? Why understand your metrics? Why train your interviewers if you can just go ask a whole bunch of random people outside if this person should join your company with no context of how your company actually operates?
Yeah, I think that's the salient point for sure, where I totally agree. What do you think is the hierarchy of signal? Right. And so the different signal pieces we could get is interviews, back channels, working with somebody, front door references. Like, how do you think about that?
I do think there's a time and place for all of them. Like my article doesn't say don't do back channels or don't do references, because if there is a signal that's over and over again, 5 different people at 5 different companies are like, man, Cassie can be really a jerk when it comes to when you're going up against her ideas and she's not nice about it. Then yeah, you're going to want to double down on that and be like, is this person going to be toxic for my company? I'm not saying that's me. I'm just using an example. But if that is an indicator and you're learning that through that process and you felt that too during your interview process, that is a signal you should dive into. Have those conversations with the candidate or talk to the rest of the team. Like, tell me more example based from the experience interviewing them. Where are you getting this signal? And like, did you feel that you can cooperate with this person, collaborate? And do you think that's going to be a value add? Or do you think that's going to be a detriment to our company? If, let's say, on the engineering side, over and over again, externally, people are like, their code was so messy. They ruined our code base this time and that time and that time, but their code looked flawless at your company. Maybe dive in. Maybe they've done that test before, right? Change the test. Maybe do some ad hoc coding then. Do they actually know what they're talking about? There are indicators that are going to be helpful. But if you start completely depending on this outside signal, how are you going to get strong internally with your own team to become better assessors of who can join your company, right? You become a 500-person company, you're still going to be asking people outside if this person should be hired, then your team has not understood why they've even joined your company. Right? They should know.
That's an interesting. I actually tend to agree with that. So basically, what you're saying is like we need to build the muscle, and people outside may have an opinion, but they don't have our context. And so context plus opinion is actually is higher signal than opinion minus context.
Exactly. And I use an example of myself, actually. I had joined my very first startup. I first started at behemoths of companies, old tech. I thought, this is too slow. I want to go to a startup. So my first startup, it was overwhelming for me. Coming from a large company to a startup, I was just cutting my teeth. On paper, was closing candidates, no problem there. I traveled for university recruiting, was meeting a bunch of students, learning the ropes. But the place that I had worked, there was a lot of fear around stating my opinion. So I learned very quickly, I don't really want to raise my hand and say what my opinion is, especially because I'm new to the startup world. And every time I said something, and it'd either be laughed at or whatnot. So I didn't feel like it was the right environment for me to speak up. You've known me for quite some time now. I'm a very opinionated person. I am outspoken when it comes to what I understand and how I feel about something. So even my family saw my entire personality change during my year at this company, of which they're like, you don't speak up anymore. Like, what's going on? Because I had this complete innate fear at this company. So if my following company had asked my manager or my teammates, how is Cassie when it comes to like standing her ground and having an opinion? And if that truly mattered at my next company and they had asked that and backchanneled me, they'd probably be like, you should pass on Cassie. And I would have lost that opportunity, of which at the next company, I spent 4.5 years scaling the company, right? So that type of, and so I've made it clear in my article too, like if you're just asking one person from one other company context that has nothing to do with yours, that's not going to be enough for you. And you are fully outsourcing your judgment, trusting this random other person who doesn't have that same context as you. If they went and asked every single one of my companies prior, even the larger scale companies, what's Cassie's opinion like? Does she stand her ground? They would have heard something completely different, right? Like I gave a presentation at one of my larger companies, like, we can move faster. Here's my opinion. Like, here's how we should structure it. But if they only asked the company before, it would have been a completely different picture. So that's why I say you got to be really careful doing that. And unless you have a lot of different contexts from multiple different companies, different work environments, and you see that trend happen over and over again, okay, maybe this person isn't learning from their past mistakes. Maybe they weren't in an environment that someone told them that, hey, we don't operate like this, right? And you should change that habit. There's just so many variables that really tie into that if you trust it as an organization, what are you saying about yourself and the values that you are interviewing for?
Okay, you've convinced me. And the reason you've convinced me is because the mosaic of a person is very wide ranging. And the context, even at one place, like doesn't even get close to encapsulating that mosaic. And so I think that's true. I think the other thing that's true is spiky people, who I think can sometimes be like the highest leverage people in a company. A lot of people don't like them. They don't work well with some people sometimes. And just because you may not work well with someone doesn't mean you didn't have impact. So I agree with that. The only other add I would have is that, and people have heard me say this on the pod before, but if you get a flag in a reference or a back channel or even in an interview, bring it to the candidate. Tell the candidate that it came up, and then let's talk about it. Because it's a relationship. Like everything else in life, when me and my wife have something weird going on, I'm going to say it. Otherwise, it's just going to sit there and fester, and it's going to be weird, and I'm going to create a story, and like I'm going to ruminate on it, and it's going to go down versus state the thing, tell the person the thing, and then be curious. And that's why I think, okay, I agree with you. You are right. That is the use of the back channel. So I apologize for disagreeing with you initially.
No. Hey, healthy debate. And there is a time and place for everything. Like if you have 2 people on your team that can interview and that's it, maybe you want more context. And I wrote about that too, right? When you're really early, you're just learning how to build that muscle. You don't have context on a specific type of role too, right? Never hired a recruiter before. Maybe you want to ask other people that worked with Cassie as a recruiter. What did she do well? What didn't she do well? What can we really grill her for? What could we utilize her as an advantage for, right? There are things that you want context from external, but you got to build that muscle over time. And so when I hear that we've got businesses of 100 people now just asking their Slack, anybody know this? Anyone know this person through outside and any objections? You're just like, what does this outside person know that your team doesn't at this point?
Lazy and misguided. Well, Cassie, I got to say, honestly, I think you are at the tip of the spear of what's going on in AI right now. I'm so appreciative that you showed your book. Like you opened the kimono and let us in. I can't thank you enough for this time. I really appreciate it.
Of course, you're so welcome. And I welcome more people to reach out because I learn from everyone who's building. Just went to another conference of which I met other VC talent partners building some really cool things. So I love hearing about it. And it helps me think of my roadmap and where do I want to prioritize my time as well. But anything that I can share that can knock down that barrier to people just trying it, I'd love to be able to help.
Thanks, Omi. We appreciate you.
Of course.